Welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. And check out the Three Championship Drive podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button there. And do me a favor, tell a Pistons fan what a trade deadline. No stars being moved this year, but we got that throughout the season. We didn't need any more of those big name guys being moved. We had it all already. That's fine with me. I'm just excited that the Pistons finally did something. They made me eat my own words. I did not expect them to make this many trades. I thought they improved the roster. I'm giving the trade deadline for the Pistons a B plus grade. I really like some of the names that are coming in. They're definitely going to help this team. I really think we're going to see a whole new Monty Williams, too. I mean, this guy he's always had more success with veterans. He finally has veterans on the team. He finally has a roster full of NBA players. No more of these guys that should be getting time in the G League. Those guys should stay there. They are not on this roster anymore. I am excited. I think this is going to be a great second half of the season for the Pistons when all these names come in and they finally get settled in. It's going to be great. It really is. I might just be excited. I might just be optimistic. I might just be crazy. Who knows? But I am just excited for the second half of the season. So let's get into these trades. My favorite trade, the first one we're going to talk about is Simone Fontecchio. I am a huge fan of him. He was a former Utah Jazz forward. The Pistons traded a 2024 second round pick, Kevin Knox, and the draft rights to Gabriel Procida. My Procida dream is dead. If you've heard me on other podcasts, you've heard me say I expected the Pistons to be in the Eastern Conference Finals a few years from now. And they needed an offensive punch. Gabriel Procida gets off the plane wearing his country's flag around him like he's Superman, and he becomes the offensive punch. That's no longer going to happen. The dream for Simone Fontecchio is here, and it's alive and well. The 2024 second round pick is the better of the Washington and Memphis pick. It's expected to be a high second round pick. I heard that they're expecting it to be around 32. And I've been listening to some other podcasts, and they have been criticizing the Detroit Pistons for doing that. They're like, you could really use the 32nd overall pick. That's going to be a great pick. But this is a weak NBA draft, according to most experts. So I don't really get what the big deal is. It's not a big deal to me. I would rather have Fontecchio. I think he's going to be better than anybody the Pistons could pick with that 32nd overall pick. I actually went back and looked from drafts from 2005 when I was looking through all, and that seems to be the year the NBA went to 60 picks. There are three names that stood out drafted at 32. And I know you can get better players in the second round, like Spencer Dinwiddie. He went 33. I get it. But I'm only talking about the guys picked at 32, because that seems to be the number everybody is fixated on. There's three names. Steve Novak, he played 11 years. Montrezl Harrell, I believe he was the sixth man of the year winner. And Zubac, who is still the starting center for the Clippers. Those guys were drafted at 32. Everybody else, they don't need to be mentioned because who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the 32nd overall pick. I would, again, rather have Fontecchio than that 32nd overall pick. It's not that big of a deal for me. I think if any other team had traded that second round pick, it wouldn't have been looked at. I just think Detroit is such a laughing stock when it comes to the NBA media that they don't, that they'd rather just make fun of it. Because never in my life have I heard of a second round pick being talked about the way it has been talked about since this trade went down. It's just ridiculous to me. So in really, like, how many more young guys do the Pistons need to add? I would rather have veterans on this team. I want to start watching winning basketball. I don't need another project coming in in the second round. In Detroit, they've hit some guys in years past in the second round. Chris Middleton, naming one of them. Like, yeah, and you can find some guys like Isaiah Thomas was a stud when he was the 60th pick overall. I've already mentioned Spencer Dinwiddie, Nikola Jokic. He was a great pick in the second round, but Man, it's dude, it's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot in the first round, but it's more of a crapshoot in the second round. So again, who cares? Let's get into Simone Fontecchio. He will be a restricted free agent. That means the Pistons can match any offer he receives this offseason. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that dude will probably make close to $12 million per year. I think that is more than a fair price for what he brings you. He is 28 years old after all. I think he's going to be a great fit for the Pistons on offense and defense. He's not a lockdown defender, but he tries and he hustles and he can get after it defensively. Offensively, he's shooting 39% from the 3-point line. He's a good cutter. He can attack closeouts. I really don't get the Boyan comparison that some Pistons fans you know, seem to be making right now because Boyan, that's a guy that's a shot creator. You know, you can put him in ISO, he can go out, create his own bucket. Simone Fontecchio, he's more of a relocate, move without the ball, which is still creating your own shot if you look at it that way. But he's not the guy you hand the ball to and say, "All right, go kick this dude's ass one on one." He just doesn't do that. That's not his game. He's a European guy. He played 10 years overseas before he became an NBA player, and he's just a solid player. I think he's going to be a great running mate for Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. This is a guy that can just knock down shots. He's going to find space in the defense and he's going to hit that shot. That's what he is going to do. This, in my opinion, is one of the better trades that I think we've seen all trade deadline just because there weren't stars being moved. You need guys like this. They complete the roster. And if he can play at a high level like he was in Utah, it's a steal for the Pistons. Like it's a steal. They only had to get rid of Kevin Knox, the 2024 second round pick, and the draft rights to Gabriel Procida. Before I move on, Gabriel Procida was the 36th pick in his draft, and he has not touched an NBA floor yet. That is just 4 picks away from the 32nd pick that the Pistons apparently traded away. That's just a little, I don't know, context for you guys. So the second trade I want to talk about, this is Monte Morris, the hometown kid from Flint, the guy that wanted to play for the Pistons. I'm going to miss him. He missed 43 games for the Pistons with an injury this year. He only played 6. You could see that he was still trying to kick the rust off his frame a little bit, get the rust off his game. And I'm going to miss him. I think he really had the potential to be a great backup for the Pistons. He was only 28. He's only 28 years old. You know, one of the best backups, doesn't turn the ball over, can knock down a shot. Unfortunately, he just wasn't really playing up to his level in Detroit, but it was only 6 games. So when I heard the rumor that the Minnesota Timberwolves were interested in Monte Morris, I thought the Pistons would be getting back Kyle Anderson. And I got to say, I got a lot of love for Slow Mo. I love his versatility at that forward spot. Great playmaker, solid defensively, doesn't space the floor, just shoots a little bit below league average. Struggling a little bit this year offensively, but I am still a huge fan. I really thought that would be the name coming back. Instead, we get 2 guys that I do really like as well, and I'm not disappointed in it. So that trade was Monte Morris to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Troy Brown Jr. and Shake Milton and a 2030 second round pick, which is just so crazy to think about. Like the kid's probably in middle school right now, and he's eventually going to be on the Pistons radar at some point in the second round if they don't trade it away. I really like Troy Brown Jr. and Shake Milton. These were guys that were getting minutes and part of a rotation on a championship contending team, a team that had lofty goals this year, and they were cracking the rotation. And now they're coming to Detroit. These guys they're not big time players, but if they were good enough to get minutes on the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're going to be pretty good for the Detroit Pistons. Troy Brown Jr. is your typical 3-and-D player. He's shooting 36.9% this season from the 3-point line. I went on Reddit and I was reading what Laker fans had to say about him because I believe he had 45 starts for the Lakers last year. And there was a lot of love from Laker fans. They loved his hustle. They loved his defense. They loved that he used up every minute that he was on the floor and made an impact with, the skill set he has. And there were even some Lakers fans that were saying he deserved more minutes than Rui Hachimura. So that's a big thing that's huge from, basketball fans out there that they valued this guy and they thought he could potentially be a bigger piece than what he was getting with the Lakers. He brings hustle, defense in that sweet three-point shooting percentage. Shoots 38% from the break and also shoots around 38%, I believe, from the right corner. He's going to be one of these guys that I wouldn't be surprised if he was here longer in Detroit. I think he'll make a home in Detroit for at least a couple of seasons. He kind of seems to fit that mold, that hustle, that defense, that grit and grind kind of player. Very strong rebounder from the weak side. I mean, he averaged, I think, five, almost six rebounds his second year in Washington, and he is a former first round pick by the Wizards. Now, moving on to Shake Milton, he's a 6'5" guard that I expect to join Sasser in the backcourt for the second unit. He's having a down year shooting the three this year. His percentage is 26.4%, which is down from his career average of 35.8. However, from the left corner, he's shooting 44%. From the right corner, he's shooting 42.9%, but he's terrible above the break where he's shooting 13.8%. The good thing is he's not a high volume three-point shooter. I believe the most he's ever taken per game in a season is 5, and I think that was like his second or third year in Philadelphia. He is known as a scoring guard. That's typically what he is known for. He just really hasn't found his rhythm with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He was a decent bench player for the Philadelphia 76ers. I think the key for him while he's in Detroit is just trying to find consistency and just trying to find rhythm in that backup unit. I do think once that shot starts falling for him, he's going to be a pretty good player for the Pistons. Last season for the Sixers, when he had 11 starts, I looked this up, he was averaging 27 and 5. Pretty good. So, I mean, he can put up numbers. It's just that when I'm reading about his game, he's not much of a playmaker. In Minnesota, they're asking him to be more of a primary ball handler, which I think he's more of a combo guard. Hopefully he plays off of Sasser in that second unit. They don't give him too many opportunities to try to create something for others because it's not really his bread and butter. And he can get a little drive crazy. He loves to attack the defense. He is shooting 55.8% in the restricted area. In 0 to 3 feet, according to Basketball Reference, I think it's 66.6% around the rim. But he does get a little crazy, like I just said. He loves to drive into the defense, and then it seems like he doesn't know what to do with the ball. But again, with both of these players, Shake Milton's making $5 million this year. Troy Brown Jr. is making $4 million this year. They're both on non-guaranteed deals going into this offseason. Now, if they're both on the team in June, I think June 29th for Shake Milton and June 30th for Troy Brown, then their contracts become guaranteed, which is again just $9 million between both of them, for the season, which is not bad contracts for these two players. Like I do like both of them. And for the big trade everybody's talking about. So the big trade for the Pistons was Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks being traded to the New York Knicks for Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, Ryan Archie-Diacono, and then the 2028 and 2029 second round picks. When I saw this trade initially pop up, I believe it was Alec Burks for Quentin Grimes and 2 second round picks, which I thought, holy crap, that's a steal from Troy Weaver. That is the W in Weaver right there. That's a win for him. I thought it was a little much from the Knicks, giving up for Alec Burks. I do know that they were tied to him, and he has played under Tom Thibodeau before. And I know he does like him as well, but it just seemed like a little bit of an overpay. And then we find out that it was Bojan for the rest of these guys. So actually how it came out, it was Bojan for Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, Ryan Archie-Diacono, and then I believe it was Alec Burks for Malachi Flynn in the 2 second round picks. The trade was broken up into two parts. Now, fans seem to be a little torn on this trade because we didn't get that heavily protected first round pick back from the New York Knicks. The thing is, I don't I guess I don't really care just because that first round pick turns into a second round pick in 2027. I think fans are a little bit more disappointed that we didn't get it back because we can't use it as a trade asset. Now, when the Pistons make the selection in this draft, they can actually trade the player if they want to. So they can still use the first round pick. They just have to make the selection first. But I do believe we're coming up where we can start using first round picks in trades. I think after this season, heading into next year, we can start using first round picks in trades, but don't quote me on that. I'm not really sure. I didn't read too much about that. So I am a little disappointed in the trade. Again, even though I just said I don't really care so much about the first round pick, it would have been nice. That would have been the cherry on top for me. But I still love the trade because Quentin Grimes is one heck of a defender. This is a guy with potential to defend the best players on the opposite team. You can go look up his highlights. This dude fights through screens. He gets his hands up. Doesn't draw a lot of fouls or doesn't get called for a lot of fouls. He just sticks with it, man. This is a guy that, man, defensively, there's just so much potential there. Like, he really can be special for the Detroit Pistons. And I think, he's better than any late first round pick the Pistons could have gotten any other trade. So that's really what it comes down to. Like, the value of him and the value of what you could have got with one of those first round picks. Again, I'd rather have a guy that has done it in the NBA for a couple seasons than taking a gamble on a prospect that may or may not work out, because we've seen the Pistons, they sometimes don't make the best selections. And when it comes to development, there's much to be desired when it comes to that. He's also a solid 3-point shooter. He's shooting 37.9% on 5 attempts a game for his career. So good volume, great percentage. The defense is really what you're asking for. But him and Fontecchio running with Cade and Jaden Ivey, that could be real special for the Pistons. That could be huge. And plus, he's a former teammate at Houston with Marcus Sasser. But Fontecchio and Quentin Grimes, those are the two real big prizes at the deadline for the Pistons. I really do think both of these, and even though Fontecchio is a restricted free agent, I think he will be here long term, and Quentin Grimes same. I think this trade was really about getting those 3-and-D guys in. And what really makes these trades unique for me is that we're finally going to see the Pistons really start playing modern basketball with these guys. Like, modern basketball is a lot of spacing, 3-and-D guys, and that's what they finally have on this team. So we'll get into a little bit more of this trade. You guys know I really like Evan Fournier, and I'm positive I'm the only Pistons fan that thinks he could provide some of the scoring Alec Burks did. I mean, 2 years ago, this dude played 80 and started 80 games for the New York Knicks, averaging 14 points per game. He just got in Tom Thibodeau's doghouse. I think it had something to do with, like, they said he wasn't trying to be a team player, so they just basically benched him. I do think this guy is going to get buckets for the Detroit Pistons. I really think there's a world in where he actually comes off the bench with Sasser versus Shake Milton, just because even though he does have a player option for 19 million going into the offseason, he's only 31 years old. I do think this guy has a lot of basketball left. I mean, when he was on Orlando, he was pretty good, and Boston really wanted him, and they traded for him heading into the playoffs. So I think some teams still do value him. We just haven't seen anything from him in 2 years because, again, he was in that doghouse. I think he still has a lot to prove. I think we're going to see a solid player when he touches the floor for the Detroit Pistons. Now, Malachi Flynn, he was thrown in. I don't expect him to be back after this season. His contract is up after this year. He's a 6'1" guard. His best season was his rookie year. Didn't really get a lot of minutes and a lot of run with the New York Knicks. I really don't expect much to change here in Detroit. He's a third string point guard in case there's injuries. God forbid there isn't anymore. That's really the only time I expect him to see playing time for the Pistons. Now, 5 players were waived from the Detroit Pistons. So believe they had 19 players after all the trades were made. So the Pistons are waving goodbye to Joe Harris, Daniel House Jr., who's a guy that I really liked. He was actually on my free agent target list for the Pistons this offseason. Danilo Gallinari, he's out. Ryan Arcidiacono, that was another guy that I would have really loved for him to be the third string point guard, just because he's super careful with the basketball. I believe he's played 253 games, only has like 135 turnovers in his career. He also has a new record where he's played 20 games without scoring a bucket, but he averaged like less than 2 minutes per game. So who cares? It's a weird record to give him. And then Killian Hayes, the pretty boy from Detroit, is out. And I can finally breathe a fresh of breath air that Killian Hayes is gone. We're not going to be torn on this. We're not going to be having civil wars over Killian Hayes. Should he play? Should he not? He's gone. He has the opportunity to go to a new team and continue his career. I do hope the best for him. Hopefully, he's picked up by either like San Antonio or maybe even Oklahoma City, where they have a great shooting coach. Maybe they can find some consistency in his offense. Like, I really do hope the best for him. He was one of those guys that I was so torn on since he was drafted. I was so excited for him to be Troy's first pick ever, coming in at 7. And I had a lot of high hopes for him. And I flip-flopped so much for his time. But it was this season where I just said, look, I'm done. I don't want him to be here anymore. I'm out on the Killian Hayes era. I'm fine with it. He had his cup of coffee. He had his moments for the Pistons. It was just way too inconsistent. I really do hope he finds a home. I'm really hoping he goes to San Antonio just because whatever potential is his he has, I hope they can help him find it. Like I really do. So San Antonio, that's on my wish list for Killian Hayes, followed by Oklahoma City. And dude, Memphis, why not? You're playing a bunch of young guys anyways. Your season went down with John Morant. Might as well just see what you have in the guy. Somebody give him a contract and give Tony Snell a contract. Come on, guys. And then Danilo Gallinari, I was really hoping he was going to be in Detroit longer. I do like his game. I like what he brings. He's a veteran. He's savvy, good 3-point shooter. Defensively, like can't lock anybody up, but like, dude, he could draw a hard foul. It was cool to see. But I get it. You want to do right by your vets. That's what Troy Weaver's doing. It sets you up to sign some guys in the offseason to say, you know what? Troy Weaver did good by this guy. Maybe he'll do good by me as well. So, Danilo, good luck. Hopefully, you find a home. I know the Lakers had shown interest in him. We'll see if they take a stab at him. I think he could help out there. I think there's a bunch of contending teams that would really like Danilo's veteran savviness. Joe Harris, man, I love that trade when it happened. I really thought he would provide spacing to the Pistons and bring that like 45% 3-point shooting over to Detroit. It just never happened. I think there's like 7 teams he can't sign with. So the contending list is kind of short for him, but I'm sure at some point some team is going to pick him up and hopefully they can help him find a shot. The only thing I ask from Beef Jerky Joe, don't be cooking against the Detroit Pistons now. I got a lot of love for you. But if you're going to be cooking against the Pistons, I'm not going to like you anymore. Okay. So when you come to Detroit, you maybe hit like 1 or 2 threes, then you go sit your butt on the bench and just go chill. Okay. That's all we need from you. I don't need a former Piston getting revenge every time we come to town or you come to town. So, Joe, do your thing for another team. Just don't do it against the Detroit Pistons. I want to thank you guys for supporting the 3 Championship Drive podcast on YouTube and everywhere else where you listen to it. But do me a favor, go to Google, go to Apple, go to Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. After you subscribe, leave a review, drop a rating, vote in our polls, and more importantly, tell a Pistons fan